Do we have questions for the panel?
I'm going to...
Oh,
yes.
Go ahead.
I have it. So I'm going to challenge maybe Larry Smart to participate with me in this question. At the beginning of our conference, we were given an example of a young child, well, I don't know, the high school student or something like that, who has searched the web and came up eventually with a patentable solution to one of the cancers. Here we had Yulia Ponomarenko showing us how to look at all of the data pretty much available in the universe of searchable biological data. And we have Larry Smart with all of his resources and having his entire genome sequenced, and I don't know how many years is this project, on the same campus. Are you able to do what the high schooler did with the resources of this entire university? And assuming that the answer is no, how actionable do you find this resource within your reach?
Well, I think they're not the same case. This is going to be very valuable for actually the scientific research on things like the microbiome or genomics that are just emerging, in which there are many different distributed researchers that are creating data and going into databases, but there's not sort of system integrators going across the whole thing. So one of the things that, for instance, for me, it's been invaluable is to be able to be in a campus where the university library allows you to get for free access to all these scientific journals, articles. And so I've had, read 600 or 700 of them. I couldn't do that if I wasn't in the campus. So there's a lot of this stuff that you just can't get to the data. Those barriers are very real. Now, what the high school student did, I think, was a very different approach. So I don't think they're really comparable. But I think it is going to be the real issue is the coupling between translational medical researchers and this avalanche of data, and whether you're actually going to get out of that data some new ideas for therapy or for treatment. So far, I haven't, but data itself doesn't translate into new therapy.
While I like your question, I think you're incredibly unfair, because I can turn this around and ask how many people in this room have patented something in high school? It just doesn't happen. I mean, it's an interesting little story as an anecdote, but it's not something that you build a research enterprise upon.
I was just going to say, patent don't actually mean anything. People come up with new patents. In surgery, we're notorious for coming up with new operations. There are more new operations every year than there are new treatment drugs, and a lot of them are never fully tested.
Yeah, I have a question for James. That can you share with us how difficult it could be to link with Facebook to collaborate with them and get access to all of the huge data that you can access to? Thank you.
So we're in a period right now where I think you have to have privileged access to some of these databases because of the privacy concerns that were referred to in the earlier session. But there are people at Facebook and at Twitter and at LinkedIn and these other resources that are very conscientiously thinking about the question, how do we get this data in more people's hands? Because the more people who have access to it, the more you're going to get new insights about social science and potentially new breakthroughs in terms of being able to change people's behavior for the better. So it's a difficult question because You want it to be as open as possible for the benefit of society, but you want it to be as closed as possible for the benefit of the individual.
So I want to probe this question we touched on earlier, but now we have a broader panel of different sociologies, I guess. And it relates to the desire for data sharing. I mean, sort of Frank said that physicists are no better than biologists, but they're forced to be because they're working off a large instrument, and that sort of forces sharing. I mean, maybe I'm paraphrasing you incorrectly, but it is kind of and then biologists tend to not share until they've published, and then maybe they'll share. And that seems, at the same time, no one's mentioned this, but there's a lot of activity in governments all over the world, in this country, particularly through the Office of Science and Technology Policy, to effectively engage researchers and seriously encourage them to share. And I'm just wondering if we got more comments about this whole data sharing aspect, because it seems to me, when you see all this cross-cutting work, that it's almost critical, but then there's what comes down to is perhaps a desire to share, but on the other hand, there's the reward system that really in some ways works against it. So there's all this interplay at the institutional level, at the government level, and the individual level, and I'm just wondering what the panel has to say about that. No, I mean, is data? Let me make it simpler. Is data sharing different in different domains by desire?
I know that in the social sciences, the people who manage to pull off big data science end up getting amply rewarded. So I'm thinking of Joe Henrich and the project on small-scale societies around the world. That's yielded 2 books and thousands of citations, probably a couple dozen articles. It was big small-scale social science. You've got the paper that's just out recently with the psychologists who were replicating the experiments that had come under attack as not being replicable. It was led by Brian Nosek, and I'm sure that his leadership of that project is going to help him personally in his career. So I think the more we have examples of people who expend their sort of short-term capital to organize other scientists, but then get rewarded later on, I think the easier it's going to be to say this is a career path that you could take even if you're relatively junior.
I would make, in addition to this, I would make a distinction between archival quality, or maybe not, quality is not the right word, but between primary data that has is of common use versus private data that is your own competitive advantage. So I don't share my private data either with my collaborators. I have a group of 20 people or 30 people that I share my private data with, that I have produced, my group has produced. But the data that the experiment produces as a community, we all share. And so there is a starting point that is shared because that's the right thing to do and it makes sense. And then there is a derivative that the individual does in order to create yourself a competitive advantage. And I think that's also fair. And you have to make it possible that both coexist. And I don't know how that translates to other sciences, but it fundamentally, just from human nature and sociology, both must exist in some way. Otherwise, the thing doesn't work. The system doesn't work. I don't know whether I'm making sense, but.
I think part of the mentality that's out there is that the data is the new oil, and that's going to have to change. What we have seen, there's obviously privacy and security issues with sharing the data and what you share and how you can share. And in smart grid, a lot of that is controlling the system on campus, that we have to be careful what we can share. But what we have seen over the past year in our tech talks, for example, as the companies come and present about their data, it's really oftentimes not, in predictive analytics world, it's not oftentimes so much the data, it's the novel features they create out of that data that come from their domain experience and expertise, which is they won't share. So as Frank has pointed out, there is data and then there is data.
I can tell about biology, which you feel also know well. So, in working with many experimental labs and working with a lot of data myself, I can say people are not willing to share data. They just don't know how and where. There is no infrastructure. For example, PDB is beautiful case. You require people to submit the structure, obtain PDB ID, and only after that they can publish. So we are trying to do the same with the immunoepitope database, which I'm working on. And it still didn't happen, actually. The database existing since 2004, and now we have 9 years past. And NIH still can't enforce that. So people submit data to our database, obtain ID, and then publish. So, and like, for example, then a GEO archive database for gene expression data was developed. And people started submitting data there. And initially it was only raw data, and then they allowed processed data, and people do all that. Another issue that they don't do very well job is providing metadata, actually. And for example, people are willing to submit supplements to the publications, but not every journal actually allows to do that. So I think the major issue is infrastructure. So we need to develop infrastructure in different domains of science for people to share data. And the same like Facebook, if it would not exist, no one would share data.
There are infrastructures in place, but they're incredibly difficult to deal with when it comes to human subjects. So dbGaP is NIH's mechanism for sharing data, and I think it's like a 20 or 25-page application to get access to this data. It's insane. If my collaborator hadn't filled out that form and I could just sort of copy that form and to do the submission, I wouldn't be working with that data because it just wouldn't have been worth it to me. I would have gone somewhere else. So it's not just creating new infrastructure, it's getting the infrastructure we have in place to work better and to be lighter touch.
Yeah, a question on just voting on Facebook. Just in one of the experiments, you just specified just 3 different categories of close friends, and then close friends of friends, and then the goal was just how they are predictive of our, for example, behavior. And I just noticed that at some point, the close friends of friends just exceeded just the friends, the predictivity of the friends. So any comment on that? Because intuitively, I just expect that friends are more influent on me, for example, than close friends of friends.
Right, so I didn't present any of the results on close friends of friends in this. And in the paper, we find that the close friends of close friends have an impact on online behavior, but not on real-world behavior as far as we can tell. If they do have an impact, it's smaller than we can detect being different due to chance. But I didn't present those results. I just was focusing on the friends and the close friends.